You're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show, with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you all the news from the local area and around the world. And we're very fortunate on this show to have some of the world's best athletes, sports people who work in the field of sport across various disciplines, from sports psychology all the way through fitness, coaching, participants. We also have a segment we interview some of the world's most influential people in the field of psychology and related fields, and that's been really fascinating to hear some really interesting insights. Today we have a guest who's been on the show before, a living legend. Wolves, he's been there, he's played at the highest level. It's always interesting to talk to our next guest. He provides some really interesting insights. He works in the media, is known in the media. You've probably read his articles and listened to him speak in the media, that's for sure. And whenever he's come on board the show, it's been well received. Mel Eves, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Always a pleasure, Jimmy.
No, great to have you on board. And I think the last time we spoke on the show was towards the end of last season, and obviously, this season's been an interesting one to say the least. And there's been so many factors, and as we sort of draw to the close of the year, what do you make of the season, Mel? I mean, obviously you got your finger on the pulse. You sort of go to games. You've played at the highest level yourself. I mean, at the moment it's like we've got generally speaking, you've got like a 2-horse race, maybe a 1-horse race. But at the moment, it's pretty much take your pick. What are your thoughts on the season thus far?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Jimmy, in the fact that nobody at this time of the season can really pick it. People will have their favourites, but there's no clear runner. Last year, Liverpool streaked ahead and didn't look back, and deservedly won the league by a million miles. And all credit to them, and all credit to Klopp and everybody there at Anfield. They were absolutely brilliant, and nobody can deny what they did. But this year, with obviously with Van Dijk getting injured and one or two, and them having a little bit of a stumbly start, they're back up there again, which we expect. But everybody else is round them, so it's a really tight call. You've Tottenham, obviously under Mourinho, are doing well. Chelsea, Lampard, he's got them playing. Leicester are up there again, upsetting people. You then got obviously the big Manchester clubs, which everybody will know about, United and City. They're doing really well. And I don't rule out City, because they
absolutely
once they click into gear again, and they're within touching distance. City and United have both got a game in hand on everybody else. So if they win that game in hand, which you'd expect them to, they're within 3 points of the lead. So it's really fascinating. Then you've got obviously my team that I follow. I do the summarising on the radio for them. Wolves. That they can beat anybody on the day. They're not quite firing on all cylinders yet. So I don't see them troubling. The top 4 or top 6. Maybe if they can get their act in gear. Trouble in the top 6, 5th and 6th, but they're not there yet to trouble the top 4. But
absolutely.
You've got Aston Villa as well. There's Everton started off like house on fire. They're decent. So you've got loads of teams, and I think it's brilliant for the general football fan that so many teams could win the league this year.
Absolutely. And then also, then you got the teams that sort of, they come at you as well. The Leeds, the Southamptons. There's no given you're going to get a result against teams like that as well, Mel. What do you make of that sort of, throughout the league? The cliche, anyone can beat anyone, but generally speaking, pretty much the Premier League at the moment, on the day, you look at Leeds, they're relentless. They just, Southampton, they play some great football.
Well, Southampton are up there. They had a really good run. Leeds, I've seen I've seen Wolves play and covered them commentating. I've seen them play Southampton, Arsenal, and Leeds, and Leeds played some wonderful stuff. Arsenal just can't score enough goals at the moment, but they've got the players to get themselves out of the situation they're in. And Southampton have been a breath of fresh air. You know, all credit to them. They play a certain way, and it works. And they do put people under pressure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you know, you've got other teams. I've mentioned Aston Villa, West Ham on their day. It's brilliant for football in general. It's absolutely brilliant. Great for Liverpool fans last year, but for the general football fan, this is so intriguing this season. So far, obviously, teams have got a chance to pull away because we've only gone through, not got a third of the way through yet. So
absolutely, things can change. I mean, this being obviously pre-recorded too, by the time once that airs, the table can look completely different too. And a week in football is a long time. And what do you put Wolves down to, Mel? I mean, I looked at things at the start of the year and sort of spoke to you, and I think that there were high expectations. Obviously, I've got a memory block now. They lost that player to Liverpool. Liverpool gone in. It was a good piece of business, I suppose, for them. But I mean, where Wolves at the moment? I mean, it's still early days. Yeah. There's still, you know, a few wins will change things. But what do you make of their performances this year, Mel?
Well, they've lost two of their best players. Yeah. Matt Doherty went to Tottenham, who were fighting it out at the top, and Diogo Jota went to Liverpool, who were fighting it out at the top. So to lose two of your best players, most consistent players, and that made a massive difference. It's very difficult to replace them. And then with Wolves obviously losing Raul Jimenez with the obviously nasty clash of heads with David Luiz in the Arsenal game, then that's why Wolves are going to struggle to recapture what they did last season. So I think I've just got a feeling it'll just be a season where they've just got to regroup and go from there, because I can't really see them challenging the way that they did in the last couple of seasons. But we will see. There's still time.
Yeah, you never know. And I suppose in saying that shows how far they've come, Mel, where, the last few seasons where obviously, back in the Premier League, they've consolidated position in the Premier League. We sort of see teams, it's not so, certainly not comparing, obviously, it's difficult to compare different teams, but we've seen the likes of Sheffield United struggle this season, and how life in the Premier League can be difficult. I mean, what do you make of that, Mel, where a team one season can finish in the top 7 or 8, and then the next season just cannot get a win is that the strength of the Premier League? I suppose there's a lot of variables there. I mean, what do you make of that, really? I mean,
I think it is the strength of the Premier League, and we've had Sheffield United, another one of my old clubs, doing extremely well in their first season back, and then they're struggling this year. Burnley under Dyche have been up there around the top echelons as well, and they're struggling again. They're struggling this season. So it's hard. It's hard. You've got teams that are looking to. Then you've got Leeds coming in there doing very well. Fulham are going to be struggling for me most of the time, but at least they've got themselves a couple of wins. So it's tough. It really is the toughest league in the world for me, and every team is doing their best to A, to stop in there, and B to test themselves and get as high as they can. But there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. You have to keep reinvesting and getting your squad right. It doesn't matter who you are. That's why Liverpool have spent 45 million on on Jota from Wolves.
Yeah, what a great sign that was too. Yeah.
Oh, they've got their strike force. Why do they need players? Yeah, they can afford to have a bench with 40-50 million pound players on.
Absolutely.
Whereas with all due respect to Sheffield United, they can't.
No, absolutely, no, for sure. I mean, I know obviously you had a stint at Sheffield United, and you're very close to Wolves, and I mean, Jota for me was a bargain. You've obviously seen him play a lot more than what I have, but I just thought for Liverpool, what a great piece of business for them. I mean, obviously Klopp, the sort of manager, is going to, the training methods and the expectations, but also you mentioned Sheffield there, and I thought that they bought a striker, the young lad from Liverpool, and I just think sometimes, Mel, is that sort of one for the future? I mean, realistically, can a young lad keep you up in terms of scoring the goals you need?
Well, time will tell. There's never. Look, Wolves have spent 35 million on an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Who's one for the future, but then he might need to be pressed into action a little bit more now.
Yes, yeah.
Diogo Silva. He's probably going to have to play a little bit more, and because he was the understudy, or he was going to learn from Raul Jimenez. But with Jimenez going to be out for obviously a few months at least, he might be pressed into action a bit more. But for me, he's not quite ready yet. Certainly to do anywhere near as good as Raul would be doing anyway. So.
And I suppose it's hard to sort of buy. It's not easy to get, to buy players as a competitive market. In terms of your own sort of looking at from a perspective, sort of young players, we have young players listening to the show as well, and they're looking to develop their game. I mean, you played in an era, Mel, where it was tough, obviously physically. You go out there, you knew you were in a game, but it sort of strikes me that you're the sort of player that sort of kept developing his game to sort of stay and carry on and keep scoring and keep being effective as a player. What I notice in the Premier League now, do you think the technology, Mel, has sort of changed the dynamic for players? I mean, it's easier to sort of work someone out now in terms of you've got all these sort of methodologies these days to work out players' weaknesses, and if you don't keep improving, you're going to be that sort of one-season wonder type thing. And what can players do, Mel, in terms of to stay at the forefront of their game, and sort of if they do get sort of worked out and go on the left-hand side or cut back in, and
I think the players have got to do what I call the Japanese call it Kaizen.
Yeah.
In other words, never-ending improvement. You've always got to be looking, and obviously the coaching staff, manager, and strength and conditioning coaches, movement coaches. They've got to be looking at what can I do to improve what I'm doing? What can I do to make sure that I stay as the best at what I'm doing? Because it's all right getting in the team in the Premier League, staying there is another thing, and then improving on what you're doing. Because it's not a case of saying, well, there's nobody at the club better than me, so the manager's got to pick me. That's not the way it works. Because what they do is they go out and they'll spend 50, 60, 70, 80 million pounds on somebody else from somewhere else if you're not doing it. So nobody can be sure about what they're doing. They've got to keep doing it. And that means they've got to get themselves in the best physical condition. They've got to make sure that they eat and drink right. And then the big thing, because the clubs are getting very good at that, preparing the players physically and nutrition-wise, etc. There's far more appreciation and science behind it now than there was when I played, for instance. But the big thing, which I still don't believe has come on anywhere near as well as the physical and the nutrition side of the game, is the controlling your emotions under pressure, which is the big thing. So it's all about can they psychologically and emotionally be up to speed? Can they understand that success and performance and getting the results is all an inside-out job? It has nothing to do with what's going on outside, what's going on in the press, what pressures you've got outside of the game. It's to do with, can I control my performance?
Absolutely.
And that's the big key. We talk about this, Jimmy. You're world class at what you do as far as that's concerned. I'm flipping good at what I do as well. And I've studied this for over 30 odd years. And this is all in my book. It's a little bit of a plug here.
Absolutely. So, no, let's get it out there. It'd be great, yeah, for sure.
I've got it's called the 3 E's.
Yeah.
Because there's 3 E's in my name, Mel Eves, and it's all about how to achieve optimum performance.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
And it's only a little short book, but it goes through. The first E is how you exercise or move, the physical stuff. Second E is what you eat, in other words, the nutrition, what you drink, etc. And then the third E is emotional intelligence, because we've all heard of IQ, which is intelligence quotient, or what we learn at school, etc., pass exams. And the more, the better judge of whether somebody's going to make it, certainly in football, is EQ as well. Because we've seen lads with absolutely wonderful ability. I've seen people that could do circus tricks with the ball that I could never do. But they never quite fill their potential, Jim.
Absolutely.
They don't make it, or they end up playing non-league instead.
Yeah, absolutely.
They could do things with a football I could never do, but I played at the top level.
Absolutely, yeah. And you got those sort of five-a-side players, Mel, sometimes where, and like you said, I mean, that's a really interesting point. You get the sort of player that ends up in the non-league. And sort of, spends their days sort of telling stories about what they could do. But what is that, Mel? I mean, obviously yourself, you sort of seem, really focused. You've played, at Wembley. You've been there, and I mean, what did you put that down to for yourself as a player? You able to sort of regulate yourself, your mind, and I mean,
well, that was a situation where, look, naturally, I'd played all of my football as a striker. And then, which I just alluded to before, Wolves paid a record transfer fee for Andy Gray from Aston Villa, who was the Players' Player of the Year and the Young Player of the Year from the PFA the year before or something, and he came as the record signing in British history. So obviously he's going to play. We'd also got John Richards, who was the god of Wolves, the top scorer ever, and so the manager says to me, because I'm a striker, at the one, we want to try you out wide. So obviously I'm not going to get in if you've got your two best, because we were literally played 4-4-2 then, or a variation of it, but mainly 4-4-2. And so I said, I'm not daft. So I just, I'll try there.
Yeah,
and normally you'd go, well, I'm a striker.
Yeah.
And then I ended up playing at number 11, because we just played 1 to 11 then, but I played number 11, which is kind of left wing. And I learned to actually play a role for the team. I had to learn. I had to learn how to play there. But I did. I got stuck in, and I had 2 or 3 seasons of playing out on the left until I was back up front then with Andy Gray when John Richards retired. Well, more or less coming to the end of his career, went to Portugal. But were 2 or 3 of the best seasons I've ever had. And so it was a case of mentally and emotionally, I just got stuck into it. I didn't throw my toys out the pram about, I want to do this, I want to do that. I ended up playing a role, and and really getting get results, because it was the only time I've ever played at Wembley. Fortunately, we beat Nottingham Forest 1-0, who were the reigning European champions at the time. And, I've got a cup final win, which most players go through their whole career don't play at Wembley in a major final anyway.
Absolutely.
In front of 100,000, and fortunately we won. Obviously, but that was all about, for me, knuckling down. It was nothing about skill and ability. It was about understanding what I'd got to do, and being absolutely clued in and wanting to learn all the time how to play that position.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff, and especially for any listener really, but the young listeners who play any sport for that matter, not just football. So that hearing you say that, really honest and refreshing, open sort of outlook on your own career. Obviously, you had a lot of talent, Mel. You wouldn't have got that far, that's for sure. But obviously, you've sort of mentioned there that that some of the strong aspects of your game was that persistence, that sort of making the most of what you've got. And I think there's certainly players out there that don't do that, and I think that's where the performance side comes in, and that's why it's really, really important in terms of doing the mind stuff. And I mean, you can be the most talented player in the world, if you've got the right attitude, then you probably won't get very far in the game, that's for sure. But in terms of yourself, Mel, what I find quite interesting, the era that you played the game, you had some tough opponents then. It's like, obviously you got difficult opponents these days, but back then, wow, some of the opponents that you played against, there was no quarter given, and
well, there wasn't. Defenders defended, and if you couldn't head it and kick it, you didn't play. And heading and kicking it, and then if you can control the ball and play afterwards, that was a bonus for a lot of money. It's a lot different now. Players have to be able to play as well, but the fundamentals of defending are stopping the opposition playing, and they haven't changed. It's a lot it was easier for defenders. I mean, having spoken to a lot of my counterparts who played at the same time, some of them actually joke, I don't know whether I'd have made it today, because I'd have been sent off within 5 minutes.
yeah, exactly.
Because we were told, the manager or the coaches used to tell some of the centre backs, full backs, let your opposition number know you're in the game. In other words, you've got to try and this was the emotional game, or it's a bit like the boxers, with it's some you win it before you've won the bout, before you get in the ring.
Absolutely. Because
you've intimidated the opponent, and that's what you try and do as a defender or whatever. Say, look, make your first tackle, get in there. Let him know you're in the game. In other words, if you can tackle him, win the ball and take him and put him in row Z at the same time, do it, because then he won't want to know again. And that's a bit of psychology.
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely.
But likewise, as a striker, you have to understand that was what the defenders were trying to do, and you have to rise above it and don't get involved.
Yeah.
Or play the game, or play to your strengths. If your strength is mixing it, because you're a big 6 foot 2, 3, 4 centre forward who likes to get involved and mix it, then you play your game. But if you're not like me, who wasn't a 6, I'm only 5'11", but it was more like guile and trickery, and then I didn't really want to. But you had to be able to physically hold your ground, and that's where that's where you got to be brave. That's where you have got to have the courage to say, yeah, I am going to get battered here, but you've got to be able to take it. That's why you've got to prepare yourself physically. Definitely. Because it is a physical game. You've got to be up for it physically.
Absolutely.
But mentally and emotionally, once you've done that, is the key.
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure, and that's really interesting stuff. And were there any players, Mel, for you that you kind of thought, here we go, we're in for a battle here? Did you have any sort of specific players where you sort of thought,
it was like your Kenny Burnses of this world, dished it out. I remember playing against a really good friend of mine, and but he was hard, but it was like running into a piece of granite. Was Noel Blake.
Yeah.
And Blakey was great. One of the first ones that I played against, because somebody says, who was the hardest opponent? And it was Kevin Beattie, for those older men listeners.
Yeah.
Kevin Beattie, who was the Ipswich and England left-sided centre-back. And I remember one of my earliest games, I made my debut against him, playing for Wolves against Ipswich, when Sir Bobby Robson was in charge, and Ipswich were flying and finishing at the top of the Premier League. Or certainly, I think they finished second in the time in the one seed. But he was tremendous, and he would have played over 100 times for England if he hadn't had injury problems. But I never got a kick. I literally didn't get anywhere. That's when I realised I got a lot. In the early part of my career, still got a lot to do to actually hold my own, if you know what I mean. So at the initial start of my career, I was a little bit in and out, which is what a lot of the young players can be. That they come in and then the manager has to take them out for their own good, then reintroduce them, then come back, and then eventually, if they've got everything in, all the ducks in a row, they've got themselves worked at everything they need to work at, and have got the right attitude, then they can be a permanent part of the team for quite a few years. Absolutely,
that's a great point, that, Mel. I certainly would recommend. I mean, I sort of help out with the Australasian Soccer Academy every sort of week. I run a session for them. I've sort of helped them out for a long while now. I've been involved with them. The young players, they're really talented players, and I think that point there in itself was priceless for them to listen to that and say, okay, your first game, you've played against a player, you've not got a kick, you got one of a few choices. Obviously, a lot of players will think, where do I go from here? But you've picked yourself up and developed your game and carried on. Really, that is sort of priceless for players to hear that it's not always going to go the way you want it to go. It's how you react to it, which is key. That's a big deal, really. The reaction, and I suppose throughout your own career, Mel, there would have been times where your own career, like you mentioned, players get signed and change position, and there are things I think for any young player to listen to that. I think they might look at your career, Mel, and other professionals from the outside in, and played at Wembley and scored goals and so on and so forth. It's not smooth sailing, is it, Mel? That's what I'm trying to say.
Spot on, Jimmy. It might be for your occasional superstar, but certainly for most of us.
You're Ronaldo or Messi,
It's you'll get knocked down, but it's getting back up. If you if you can keep getting up, that's the big thing. Whatever setback you have, whether it be loss of form, injuries, etc. Anything that you're not quite firing on all cylinders. You've got to have your attitude determines your altitude. Is one of my favourite sayings. In other words, can I just keep going, because it'll always get better. As long as you've got the right attitude and keep going and doing and looking and being mindful and taking advice from the right people. That's another thing.
What I find interesting. No, that's really interesting. Sorry, Mel. What I find really interesting, you sort of mentioned that, and I think, obviously in football, Mel, and every sport, it's not every player goes on to sort of, after their career, it's well documented that some players sort of struggle. I suppose we all have our struggles, but you seem to have sort of taken the positives, Mel, from your time as a professional footballer and brought them forward from a coaching point of view. Your sort of identity sort of transitioned. Is that something you sort of consciously did, or did it just happen organically? You're just a naturally sort of positive person. I mean, where does it land live that, Mel, in terms of you sort of you're out there, you're doing it, you're doing your coaching, you sort of the media, you seem to keep going and have this sort of positive spin on things and moving forward. And how have you sort of managed to do that, Mel?
I think it was kind of forced on me. So I've got no option because I ruptured my Achilles when I was 27 at Wolves. I then got fit, played a few games in the reserves and what have you at Man City when it was the old main road. So I had 6 or 7 great months there. Then I went to Sheffield United. Then I got another injury, which really put me back. And then I went to Gillingham, had to drop a division again played a couple of years down there with Keith Peacock and a young Tony Cascarino up front. And then I had more injuries. And then I couldn't quite get back fitness-wise. So I had to retire when I was about 31, 32, which was 5 or 6 years before I got any idea that I was going to not be playing professional football, because I was probably one of the fittest, so to speak, and I didn't have, and I didn't envisage packing it into any time between 35 and 40. I would have probably thought, but so at least 5 years before I've really started to think about what should I be doing after playing. It's the decision's made for me because I can't get a contract anywhere because I can't get fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I then went to the first thing that I did was, because the one thing I could do at school was add up. Now I've got an A level in maths, believe it or not. It don't make any difference when you're playing against 6'2", 6'3" centre backs who want to kick you all over the place. You can't say, "Excuse me, I've got a couple of A levels, old chap." So I went into the I was a financial advisor for a while. For a few years. Then I started lecturing at some of the football clubs about what they've got to do with various savings and insurances and everything else. And then I became a football agent because the agents came in and they were regulating. You've got to take exams, or you've got to, they were tidying that up and license. Everybody got to get a license. I was one of the first to do that. And then for 20 years I did the agency stuff, which was great, advising. But the big thing that I loved about that was helping players fulfil their potential. Mm-hmm. So I've helped to take a lot of players from non-league or lower leagues all the way to the Premier League and into international. So I'm very pleased with that, because that's the biggest thrill I got. Mm-hmm. Wasn't really doing the contracts, although I, obviously negotiated hundreds of contracts for players over the time. But the big thing was seeing players fulfil their potential.
Absolutely.
And that was the biggest thrill I got. So that's when 6 or 7 years ago, when they changed the status of the agents and everything and what have you, I thought it was time to just take a back seat from that, but just do the part of it that I really love to do, which was assisting and helping and guiding players to really achieve their potential.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's what I've done, and then obviously widened it to not just, so I don't just deal with football clubs, although I do deal with teams and individuals. I deal with the general public now as well. So I'm dealing with people in business as well as just the general public. So just overcome any kind of stressful situations they've got in their lives, but also because it's all about how do you perform.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's getting the kids to school on time in the morning, for a stressful mum who's got 3 or 4 kids to look after, to a Premier League striker who rings me up, Mel, I'm struggling to score goals. Now I know I could do, but I can't. Could go out, let's get on the training pitch and let's do some finishing practice. They do that all the time. They don't need me to do that. I just need to take the subconscious. I'm talking to somebody, the converted here, Jimmy.
Yeah.
With your good self, this is what we do.
Absolutely,
You've got to take obviously the subconscious or the unconscious blocks out of, and which is holding them back. If they knew what it was, they'd be doing it themselves.
Absolutely,
Mel. Because we've studied loads of different techniques of how to do that. We can do that pretty quickly, which general people can't. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's absolutely. That's a great point, and obviously it takes a lot of study and and so on and so forth, which obviously we've both done, and also experience. And what interesting was meant to ask you, Mel. This is what I find quite interesting for me. And I've been sort of helping out again at a non-league club in the UK, Bay Cup. I've been there before. Come back a season or two ago. I love being there. The lads are fantastic. The manager's great. The coaching staffs are great. It's fantastic. We've got Felgate, who's coach, and Brent Peters manager. They've been in the game for a long time. They know the game, and I learn off them as much as anything else. But the lads are just fantastic. But sometimes I find myself thinking, Mel, I wonder what's the difference. There are lads there that I look at and think, well, they've actually got, and recently, to be fair, a lad that was with us when I had my first stint there has gone on and got a big contract. He actually got a contract in Portugal and he sorted Saudi Arabia, I think, now. But so some do go on. But I look at some of the lads and think, wow, in earlier this year we were doing some fitness tests. I thought some of these guys, physically are on a par with some players professionally. And I've obviously worked in the professional game too, and have clients who play. I'm just trying to sort of thinking, well, what's the difference, Mel, between say some non-league players? Is it a lot of variables? What are your thoughts on that? Why are some players in the non-league and some players are playing professionally?
Great question. I managed non-league for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and I've coached some of the academies, not the professional academies, but some academies as well, and had the pleasure of working with some extraordinarily talented lads. 1 or 2, I will tell you, have gone on and done it in the league, which was no surprise. But far too many didn't fulfil their potential.
Mm.
And it's all down to, A, do they want it enough? Some of them just, unbelievably, to the vast majority of people, they'll go, well, why wouldn't you? But they don't push themselves enough.
Yeah.
You've got to want it, and you've got to be motivated to do it. And are you willing to sacrifice everything around what you need to do? In other words, are you willing to do everything you need to do
to get there? Yeah.
To get there. And some of them, the questioning, no, it's nothing to do with skill and ability. As I've said before, I've made the analogy. I've played against and trained. I remember doing an article when I was at Wolves. I was starting off, and there was an article for the Wolves programme, and the guy asked me, "We'd like you to feature you this week in a page, which we do all the players." And I went, "Okay, yeah." And one of the questions was, "Who's the best up and coming lad?" And I put this lad down who could literally do circus tricks with the ball. When we did the school sessions, he could do far more than me. It was embarrassing. I'm thinking, don't pair me with so-and-so. Show me up.
Yeah.
And because you throw the ball to him, he's like a flipping performing seal.
Gee, yeah.
Here's best. And I'm thinking, crikey, if I drop the ball, all the lads are going to laugh and go, "Oh!" So, and but he never made it. He probably might have played once or twice for the first team, but then disappeared and happened playing just lower down, just played lower down, and I never really saw him again. And you're thinking, here's me, I've put in there that he was going to be the next big thing, to break into the first team, but I don't know. And you're thinking, well, really, it's that intangible thing, Jimmy. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes lads that have just got about just the modicum of ability go on and have a 10, 20-year career in the game at a good level. And yet some lads who we've both seen in non-league thinking, oh, he's decent, cool. He could certainly hold his own at some of the, at some of the pro. There must be a slot somewhere at one of the pro clubs because he's different gravy, this kid. But they just don't want it enough. For some reason, there's something that they don't want it enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point you made there. I mean, one thing I thought about there, I mean, you mentioned there, is there a slot for the player? And you've only got so many places in professional football. I mean, most people want to be a professional footballer, at least at some point in their life. And I suppose, would that come into it, Mel? Do you think, well, what if I end up training really hard and I don't go out as socialise as much, and I'm focused on my game, I practice, all hours, and I do all the stuff and eat well, and, I don't sort of go out, partying or drinking or whatever, all these sort of things that, obviously young people, they enjoy the social. And what if I don't make it? Is that fear that if I sort of put everything into it, if I sort of give it everything I've got and I don't make it, what then type thing? Has it all been worth it? Do you think that might come into it too, Mel?
Yeah, and I think you've got to get the balance right.
Yeah.
Look, I didn't stop in every night and what have you, but you'd never find me out on a Friday night if I got a game on Saturday. Yeah, that's a good point. And to be honest, that was the same even when I played at school.
Yeah.
So I just prepared properly, but I'd be out as well as everybody else on a Saturday night after a game, but I wouldn't be out on the Friday night, or I'd have a very quiet Friday night if I was playing on a Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
but that was even before I played. But you wouldn't see me out on a Friday night when I was a pro.
Yeah.
Well, certainly when I was in the first team at Wolves.
But were you confident, Mel?
Before then, I'd probably be out. But
were you confident, Mel, that you could make it yourself? I mean, did you think I can? Obviously, Wolves were at the time.
Well, I did. Yeah, but even though at the age of 21, I'd been a pro for a couple of seasons or so. So I didn't turn pro till I was 18, just left school, and because I stayed on in the sixth form at school, which you probably wouldn't do nowadays.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Because the education is all involved with the club
academy,
now, so they've got their own education department. So you wouldn't probably want to do it now. But it was a different, it's a different time and a different era, and a different setup with the way that the education and the football worked. But because clubs, believe it or not, had to get permission from my headmaster for me to play in a FA Youth Cup game.
Wow.
Because I had to get half a day off school.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen now, would it?
No, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, once the kids sign at the age of 7 or 8 now, they're basically the club's property, and the school have to ask him for them to do anything.
Incredible.
Anyway, we won't go into the politics of all
that. Yeah.
But it's. I didn't make my debut for Wolves until I was 21.
Yeah.
In the first team, I progressed from. They ran 5 teams on a Saturday, and I started playing for the 5th team, then the 4th team, then the 3rd team on a Saturday morning, not Saturday afternoon, then the reserves. Then I was top scorer in the reserves, and then I eventually, at 21, and I'd only got, ever had 1-year contracts. Just gave you another contract after a year, 12 months to prove yourself, 12 months to prove myself, 12 months to prove myself, and then then I eventually made the breakthrough and got in the team. And then within literally months of scoring my first few goals for Wolves at the end of that one season, I got a call up to an England team managed by Sir Bobby Robson, which would be classed as a B team tour.
Yeah,
B team,
yeah.
But, there were plenty of players that went on to make that were already full internationals and went on to be full internationals. I didn't quite get a full cap, but because there were so many good players
Absolutely,
around at the time.
Yeah.
But to get called up on to get England B recognition after being an England schoolboy as well. I did okay. I wasn't the best, but I just made the best of what I got. And looking now, I could have done even more if I'd have known what I know now.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Then, if I had me advising me at 18.
What would you do, Mel, if you could advise yourself? You could go back in time.
I'd have done even more.
And what advice would you give yourself, Mel, if you, going back to, say, all the knowledge you know now, if you could sort of, speak to the 18-year-old self, what would you sort of say in terms of...
I don't know about believing yourself more, because I'd always got that. But I would have done more physically, because I wasn't the biggest. I could have done more to get myself physically. I could have done more strength and conditioning stuff, because it wasn't as probably scientific as it is now. I would have done more on the nutrition side, etc.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know now.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was always looking at it. What's the best thing I can do? But there wasn't really any real guidelines then, because it was literally, it was a pie and chips and a drinking culture when I played.
Incredible.
I remember talk about drinking culture. I remember once the manager said towards the end of a training session, with all the players, all the pros were training, so it wasn't just the first team. It was all mixed in. It was all the pros. He says, right, we'll finish off with a game. And he said, right, instead of saying, well, just pick two sides, he just went, okay, well, Jim, just do it easy. He said, I want the heavy drinkers that side, and I just want the normal drinkers that side. And we were all laughing. And of course, there was one or two lads just went to the normal drinkers, and he just said, hey, get in that side. Because then you realise the manager knew who were the proper drinkers and who were the moderate drinkers.
But do you not think, Mel?
I'm not going to tell you which side I was in.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, but you don't think, in one sense, in a way, that kind of took. I'm not suggesting that teams do that now and things have changed a lot.
It's a different culture.
Absolutely.
Totally different culture now.
But do you not think that ease? I mean, obviously pressures we put on ourselves, but do you not think some sort of diffused things? Do you not think there's a psychological effect to just now and again to put the bat and ball away and sort of just let yourself go a little bit and
I think it is. I think it's a case of the good managers, and this is where I'll bring kind of people like Klopp and Nuno at Wolves. I think he's been brilliant.
Yeah.
In understanding human psychology, in understanding how to get the best out of players, in understanding that you've got to mix things up. Okay, players, that there is the intensity of understanding that players have to understand what they've got to do when they get on that football pitch, what their job is, both when your team's got the ball and when they haven't got the ball. When you've got it individually yourself, what's expected of you. When you're defending individually yourself, one-on-one against an opposition, what's expected of you. If you pick somebody up, what's expected of you. So that you don't... Because literally, most games at the very, very top level especially can be determined by one person making a mistake or one person turning on a little bit of magic at one time.
Yeah.
So it's just very, very small margins. It's finite, literally minuscule margins at the top level. And that's all about human nature. That's all about attention to detail. That's all about understanding that you've got to let players. They've got to have a laugh and a joke at the right time.
Absolutely,
they've got to let their hair down at the right time. They've got to go out for a blowout every now and again. That doesn't mean, by the way, that you're going to have a lot of people that don't drink.
Absolutely, yeah.
You had very, 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 very few people that were teetotalers when I played. You'd literally just got the ones that would have the occasional, have a drink when, socially, and the ones that have got that would end up with a problem, and they'll probably end up alcoholics when they're finished.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there is that sort of balance and control, and it's a fine line, isn't it, Mel? Really, it is a fine line. It is a fine line, and you're good managers, and I just look back at the successful teams, or the successful times that I had within the teams, and you look at there was a harmony in the dressing room. You look at this and you're thinking about teams have good dressing rooms. It's vital, because that's where everything happens. So you've got to have a good atmosphere, a good environment to work in, and that's creating that is managers create that. Absolutely.
And then when they're out of the dressing room, they know that the senior pros that they put their trust in, they carry on that kind of bonding exercise, that kind of because they're the custodians of that of the dressing room, of that environment.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. We used to get it that if you've got good senior pros that understand, they'll just put their arm around and say, "Hey, who do you think you are? You ain't done anything yet." But they'll do it in the right way. They won't embarrass the kid. They'll just do it in the right way.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing too. It's like young players obviously are very impressionable as well, and they sort of look up to the senior pros, and obviously it's important that you sort of understand the psychology of the player as well, and especially for the younger players, you're new to it, it's a new environment, can be intimidating itself. And just sort of thinking, Mel, as sort of draw to a close, and is there any sort of contact in terms? I mean, people listening to the show, not just sports people, I suppose people in general, probably thinking, okay, Mel has talked a lot of sense here, and is there any sort of the book you mentioned, and sort of your own sort of if you have like a page they can go to see more of your work?
Well, yes. I mean, we're just getting it updated as we speak soon. So, just go to meleves.com, which is MELEVES, .com. So it's fairly straightforward. But if you put, that's the beauty of having a name that's probably fairly unique. There aren't many Mel Eveses about, as opposed to David Smith's.
Yeah.
So. So I'm fairly easy to find, but yes, you should be able to, we'll get a link to my ebooks on Amazon at the moment, so Kindle version or whatever. And absolutely, people can log on there. And is there, in looking at writing any other books, Mel? Is that sort of anything on the pipeline? And I've got some other stuff in the pipeline. I've got it's a results business, which will be coming out next year.
Brilliant.
At some stage.
I'll be looking out for that, and certainly be great to have you back on board, and we can review that. But it's been fascinating as always, Mel. I mean, we've sort of spoke at length, and really kind of you to join us, and certainly enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm sure the audience and the listeners have really enjoyed hearing some of your experiences in the game, but also some really invaluable insights, not just for sports people, but for people in general, just generally around adversity, and sort of keep going and keep focused. So I really want to thank you, Mel, for coming aboard the show. It's been great as always. We wish you every success, and Wolves as well. As long as they're not playing the Manchester-based clubs, they're okay. We don't mind so much. But thanks again, Mel. It's been great speaking to you.
Jimmy, it's always a pleasure because obviously for all your listeners, I know your background and the esteem that you're held in the work that we do, and everybody holds you up there as one of the leading lights in helping to get people perform. Helping people to perform, and all credit to you, and carry on the good work, Jimmy.
Thanks, Mel. I'll give you that fiver later, by the way. No, thanks for that. I really appreciate those kind words, Mel. And I know you don't sort of, use words lightly, and I really appreciate that. And that was Mel Eves. We call him a Wolves living legend, really. I know he's played for other clubs too, but a fantastic career at Wolves, and absolutely loves the club and football and performance. So it's great insight into his career, and obviously invaluable insights into how we can perform at our best too. That was Mel Eves on the Friday Sports Show, 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio. Your host, Jimmy Petruzzi.